Hey everyone, it's Davey Mooney coming to you from the University of North Texas, where I run the jazz guitar program. I'm a Benedetto artist, Sunnyside Records artist. Got my 4 Sunnyside records right here, and there's a new one on the way. Got my 2 Mel Bay books, Personalizing Jazz Vocabulary, and Into the Labyrinth, An Anatomy of Position Playing for Jazz Guitar. And as you can probably hear, losing my voice a little bit. We're in the semester. It's early February. Don't know when you'll see this video, but that's what time it is right now. Just came off kind of a difficult week. We had some wild weather down here in DFW. Excuse me. I guess I would edit that out, but that's too complicated. Anyway, the streets were very icy, and I was on my way up to New York to play a gig at Smalls and do some photography for the new Sunnyside album, which is coming out June 9th. It's called Way Back. And man, there was some slip and slide trying to get to the airport, but luckily I made it because I always enjoy coming back to New York, where I lived for about 6 years. And if you want to check out that Smalls gig, it's on the Smalls Live YouTube channel. Played some of the tunes from the upcoming record and some from these other CDs here with Colin Stranahan, Matt Closey, and Glenn Zaleski. So yeah, like I said, we're in the semester here at UNT, and I was thinking about talking about something a little different today. I usually take a song and explore, ideas about improvisation, since this is advanced improvisational techniques. But I've been thinking a lot about warming up these days, especially as the semester gets going and I have the guitar in my hands all day long, teaching lessons, teaching my improv class, possibly then doing a gig in the night, flying up to New York, etc., and trying to maintain sort of physical hand health. And I have a confession to make. I never used to warm up at all until recently. In my career, I used to kind of feel like whatever the first tune was on the gig or the lesson or whatever it was of the day, that was the warm-up. And yeah, at some point in the last couple of years, I just found that, I think it's because, teaching students that are on such a high level, and they would come in, first thing in the morning, wanting to play stuff that was really difficult or really fast, or both. And I found that I needed a little something just to get the blood flowing through my fingers. And what I remembered was when I was an undergrad here, and I took a classical guitar master class with Paul LeBlanc. Shout out to Paul LeBlanc. And he had us all, the jazz guys with classical guitars. The first 5 minutes of the class, we would just go this little finger pattern of 1, 2, 3, 4. And when I get up to here, I go up a fret, and then I go down. And what I try to do these days is, I try to go nice and slow, and I try not to stretch my fingers much, but I want this thing to be as legato as possible. I should do it with a metronome, but for purpose of the video, I will not. And I find that these days, I want to move like my whole hand rather than stretch, because what ends up happening a lot of the time is there's a tendency to want to go to the next note a little bit early on the guitar. And this is something that Kurt Rosenwinkel showed me back when I was in the Monk Institute. I was really fortunate to have a couple private lessons with him. And he correctly identified that for me, what was holding me back technically, and still does to this day, was, what is very natural on the guitar, which is to play sort of in a staccato way, because, if you play a note and take your finger off, it goes away, right? It's the natural state of the guitar. If you're not playing the open string, I think, is things to be very short. And he showed me an exercise that I don't do as much as I used to, an intervallic exercise where he told me not to switch to the next note until I could see the flashing light of the metronome, to prevent me from switching early. And like I said, I don't do that exercise exactly now, but I always think about, like, especially if I'm right here on this note, and the next note is right there, and, you know, I guess I could stretch my hand, and sometimes I do, you know, but when I'm first thing in the morning, I try to think about, okay, I'm going to switch quickly, but not early, to get to that note so that it's legato. So I kind of think of my warm-up as an opportunity to practice technique, in the sense that the warm-up's going to be something very slow that gets the blood flowing. And I think when you practice things technically, it's kind of good to practice them slowly as well, at least at first. So I go all the way up to here, and I have this little ritual. When I get to that note, I go. For some reason, I play a little F sharp minor 11 chord. And I try to, you know, pluck it with these four, you know, with my pick and the four fingers, and get a nice tone. And then that's the first part of the warm-up. And hopefully then I got a little blood flowing through my fingers. And then I go down here and I do this little arpeggio thing that, again, I saw in some video of Rosenwinkel. I just go up a 2-octave major 7, arpeggio, and back down. And sometimes if I'm feeling particularly frisky, I might speed it up a little bit. And again, the goal is to just get as legato of a sound as possible, which is largely achieved by not cutting anything off, which seems like obvious, but, you know, on the guitar, not cutting things off is fraught. And I usually go up and then I go back down. And then another thing that I do in my warm-up that is also related to technique are some other arpeggio exercises, because you know, I came up in the 90s, as I've said on many of these videos, and I felt like the apex of technical shredding jazz guitar in the 90s was still kind of like Martino and George Benson. And, you know, I think there's some things that Metheny did to a lesser extent. But, and for me, growing up in New Orleans, it was Steve Masakowski. And a lot of my technical practice was geared around, you know, playing very close intervals fast and trying to get that kind of shreddy sound out of half steps and whole steps and chromaticism. And when it came time to play wider intervals, I just didn't really have a system or any way of approaching it. And so I think what I would start to do as it became the 2000s and the sound of jazz guitar changed, and I felt like wider intervals were kind of important. I mean, they were always important, but, you know, in my mind, this is my own journey, I would just kind of go for it. Like, okay, well, I know this one thing that I can do technically, and so I should probably, I knew that I should probably start over and try to figure out how to do the other thing, but I felt like at the time I didn't have the time. Although I had more time then than I do now, but that's, you know, the folly of youth, right? So here's one thing that I do now that I try to incorporate into my playing. So, and I do in my warm-up, I do this like 2-octave minor arpeggio. And over here I'm just alternate picking it. And why this particular fingering? I don't know, y'all. Sorry, I can't remember how this came to me. I'm sure there's other ways to figure it. This is what I do. And I find it's hard to alternate pick when you get down to these lower strings, especially when you're descending. Then again, if I'm feeling froggy, I might speed it up a little bit. Make sure I've got everything there. And so on and so forth. So that in the heat of battle, when I'm playing, I have access to that to break up the half steps and whole steps and things that that I always play. Although, you know, a lot of time has passed, so I probably have incorporated a lot of different things. I think I originally started doing that because I was playing in the Hot Club of New Orleans, and I sort of identified that, you know, in Django Reinhardt's playing, you get a lot of those kind of big arpeggios. And so I wanted to incorporate some of that into my soloing so I could sort of hint at that I'd listen to some Django. And so anyway, 20 years later, I'm starting to warm up and try to figure out technically how to do it. And, you know, you could obviously alter that. You could play major arpeggios. You could do any kind of arpeggios and be more systematic about it. I just find I don't have that much warm-up time usually, so that's what I do. And then very recently, I started incorporating this other thing. I'll just show you. I've been going. Just this little 3-note cell. Right, so starting on G is G, C, D in 3 different octaves. And I started doing that because I was playing the tune Infinize, and on those sus chords, you know, I was hearing something like that, something intervallic, and something that could sound a little different on those sus chords. And I think I accidentally played something like that on a solo, and got lucky, got away with it. And I was like, oh, that's cool, I'll do that every time. And then I quickly realized that technically I had gotten lucky the first time and I didn't really know what I was doing. So, you know, I think that's where I'm at now. I try to incorporate into my warm-up if there's something technical that I'm trying to work on, because in the warm-up it'll be slow. So I do that all the way up here. And again, this is pretty similar to that exercise Kurt Rosenwinkel showed me all those years ago in some ways, and that the trick is to not, if I'm on that finger and this is the next one, the tendency is going to be to cut this one off to get to that one. So I try to switch quickly, and especially here, the next note would be this finger here, right? So. That little 3-note cell has a lot of applications. I was playing my song Swing Set at Smalls, and I realized, like, on a G major 7, sharp 11, if I play that little idea off the 3rd, so starting on B, see, that's why I gotta practice it. You get a cool collection of notes, right? B, E, F sharp. That's a cool little cell. And if I want to break up my usual, you know. You know, it's pretty different than my usual thing. And I'm still trying to incorporate it into my playing in a more natural way. You don't want it to sound like, okay, you're doing your thing, your normal language, and then here's a thing that's obviously a lick. But anyway, so y'all, I do this every morning before the day of sitting in this chair, you know, before the onslaught of lessons and classes and things that I have to do. And I try, even if I don't have any students before, if I'm on a gig, I try to get there a little early and at least do the first part of it, just to get the blood flowing through my fingers. And you know what? I feel like it has made a difference just in my hand health, I feel a little less pain and tension in my hands. I've never had any major injuries, but especially like if I do a lot of solo gigs, I start to feel it. And so anyway, just wanted to make a video. It's such a big part of my playing routine these days, or it's a regular part. So I wanted to talk about it, and I'm sure there's a lot of other philosophies about warm-ups and practicing technique, but for me, that's where I'm at right now. So I hope that's been some help to you all, or at least been interesting. All right, take care.